if I ignore the voice of conscience, maybe another time it'll speak to me, but the second time I ignore it, it's going to stop speaking to me.
The experience was one of tingling, like a light that lit up my spinal column. It was as if like shimmering diamonds had entered and risen again, and I completely felt calm in that moment.
So my starting point for the journey was the subject of conscience, and when I heard about this, it awoke something in me and it was very powerful.
We just need to get outside of that fearful mind and not let what is happening in the moment be the director.
But think about all the forces that prevented you or tried to prevent you from coming here tonight. And that immediately tells you how powerful those forces are. You're here. And so the inner voice was telling you to come. So it turned out to be stronger.
Many thanks to the Nehru Centre for once again opening its doors to us this evening. So you obviously all made a really good decision to come and be here this evening. And I wonder whether you were listening to your own inner voice in guiding you to come here. Maybe you had a sense that there was something that you might hear that would be important for the next step on your journey. But what is this thing called the inner voice, and how do we hear it? And I wonder whether in today's world, where we are literally bombarded from the moment we open our eyes, have we lost the ability to have that inner silence and stillness where we can indeed hear that still small voice within? I think we are in for a treat tonight. Two very spiritually powerful women who have both mastered the art of listening to their inner voice. You've heard Smita's biography as well. She spans yoga teaching, transformational coaching. She's a TV presenter and content creator, has been in business for 25 years, and has her own YouTube channel, the Self-Discovery Channel. And on this, she has interviewed politicians, entrepreneurs, yoga instructors, gurus, and she does her own guided meditation commentaries, and these appear in places like Insight Timer and Spotify and Apple. And Smita was born in Gujarat, in the same place that Mahatma Gandhi came from, and she came to live in the UK at the age of 10, and she had sort of a profound spiritual experience around the age of 19, 20. And there are similarities there with Sister Jayanti, who, as you've already heard, is the additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris, the largest spiritual organization in the world for both men and women, to be led by women. She's also the head of Europe and the Middle East for the Brahma Kumaris. And Sister Jayanti really is a visionary, pioneering leader, much sought after as a speaker at conferences on new consciousness, on soul-inspired leadership, and of course, climate change conferences since 2009. She's been present at nearly all of them, I think, bar just one. And Sister Jayanti was born in Pune, and she came to live in London at the age of 8, and she too had a significant spiritual intervention at the age of 19. So there are definitely parallels, and I think we're going to really learn something new and have hopefully a very special evening. So please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Sister Jayanti and Smita Joshi. It's great to be here all together and to have such an interesting topic to dive into. I wonder if I could begin by asking you both, maybe Smita, begin with you, of how it happened that you first became aware that there was an inner voice that you could connect with and that could almost give you wisdom from another plane, another dimension.
Thank you, Philippa. I just want to start by thanking everybody coming this evening. So appreciative. Such a privilege. Thank you so much for joining. And Philippa, something happened when I was 7 years old. And in that moment, as a 7-year-old little child, I went to every day and every morning and evening, we would sit at the shrine, as we do, in our Indian homes, and do our mantras and our pujas and so on, so morning and evening. And that day I sat down and I had a conversation with God. My conversation with what had happened just now was a very traumatic situation and shocking, and it was actually, I potentially could have died. I sat there and I said, you don't exist, do you? Because if you did, this wouldn't be happening. Like, you're just made of clay. And in that moment, I had this vision where I saw this great palm. It was a huge palm, like a magic carpet. And it was going like this and had a little girl in it. And the only words I heard were, "You are well taken care of. You have a purpose to serve here." And that was all. But with that was this experience. And the experience was one of tingling, like a light that lit up my spinal column. It was as if like shimmering diamonds had entered and risen again. And I completely felt calm in that moment. So calm that whenever anything else happened in my life since, that experience stayed with me. And I remembered the words, and I remembered the feeling that actually I'm taken care of. Like, we are taken care of. It wasn't just for me, I felt it was for all of us, that we are all taken care of. And that we just need to get outside of that fearful mind and not let what is happening in the moment be the director of what is awaiting and what is possible. So that was when I started to relate to that voice as my inner diamond.
Very nice. And interesting how it was at a time of acute need and potential threat and danger. And I think it's often the case, it's when our back is against the wall that we surrender almost and invite in some intervention. Sister Jayanti, you grew up in a spiritual family. Your mother and grandmother were both a real influence on you. Do you remember a moment when you became aware that you had your own inner direction and guidance and inner voice that you could connect with?
That awakening happened much later, but there's another parallel with Smita, because when I was 7 and we had our summer holidays in India in April and May, I was with Daddy Janki. Some who knew Daddy Janki? Anyone? A few. So Daddy Janki was in a place called Pune, which was my hometown. And I was there with my grandmother and mother and grandfather and great-grandmother actually also. And at that time, I went to children's class with the Brahma Kumaris, and Daddy Janki would be there. And so it was a very lovely, warm family feeling. And then when I was 8, in the month of May, a few weeks later, they had a celebration for my birthday at the center. And so that family feeling just continued. And then we migrated to London some months later. And it would have been many, many years later that I had a spiritual awakening as such. I suppose everybody talks to their conscience, or their conscience talks to them, and you come to several decisions yourself. And so for me, it was very interesting that after having been in India for a stretch of time when I was 18, then again, I went to Daddy Janki. I'd known her since childhood. And she asked me, because she knew I'd been in India for a few months by then, that I hadn't gone to see her. And she said, do you want to say something or shall I say something? I said, Daddy, I've come to listen. And the first thing she started talking about was conscience. And here I am, many years later, addressing the subject of the inner voice, the conscience again. So my starting point for the journey was the subject of conscience. And when I heard about this, it awoke something in me and it was very powerful. And within the space of 6 weeks, I decided that this is to be my life. So when the conscience does awaken, it moves you.
Smita, one of the reasons we're here this evening is to celebrate the success of your trilogy, Karma and Diamonds, and congratulations for that, by the way. The idea being that no matter what your karma that you are born into, the cards that fate has dealt for you, you can turn that into something special and create your own diamonds. What is it about the analogy of the diamond that for you fits so perfectly as a way of understanding the soul and the self?
The experience that I've had with the field, the you can call it Atman, beyond the identity that I am myself, the Jivatman, the one that is landed, the little spark of divinity or consciousness that's landed in this body with all its experiences and so on, is then connected to, you could say it's the ocean of consciousness, whereas we're like the drop. A little drop has landed in here. And that ocean is then connected to the rest of the universe that we call all that is. And so while the two are one and the same, they have slightly different roles to play in relationship to who we are as a human being, as an identity, as a walking, talking, material manifested person. And my experience of it has been that it is a very multifaceted, I suppose, a consciousness, in the sense that when we start to tap into it, I have asked it questions to resolve very, very sticky karmic patterns in my life. And it has guided me down the path that I could never, ever have imagined would hold answers for me. It's taken me into nooks and crannies of the world. It's taken me into previous existences where things were left incomplete and so on. And at the same time, when I was working in corporates, one of my main role was to actually win big business, where we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds worth of deals and so on. And I found it very hard. I'm very strategic, but I found it very hard to actually, to follow my own strategy, because there's something within me that was always like switched on and turned on. It would say, like, call that CEO now, and it would be 8:00 in the morning, and he would answer in the bank. So somebody who might be running a bank such as HSBC, let's say, that sort of scale. But I'd call his office and he would answer the phone. So it would be things like that has me believe that there's a multifaceted element to this consciousness that we can tap into as people living in the world. So that diamond element is that knowledge that we can tap into through that consciousness, which can then prism through into however we make ourselves available to it. And we're as good as the questions we are. So anybody who knows about ChatGPT, you're as good as your prompt as to how it will guide you. And it's exactly the same with that field of consciousness. It's that intelligence that we're tapping into. So for me, it's a very multifaceted consciousness and intelligence that we have the access to tapping into. And it's very pure. It just needs us to get out of the way, meaning the mind stuff. It's like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is second sutra. He says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And then in the third, he actually tells you what happens if you do Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha means basically the mind is a whirlpool, and yoga takes place as in the union or connection with that higher consciousness. When we allow that whirlpool of the mind stuff to calm down, then we can access that. But when you access that, the third sutra is about what happens is that you become aligned with it. So even your ego and even your identity becomes so seduced by that field of pure awareness that it actually falls in line to just want more of it. And so we then become aligned, integrated, and tapping into that. So for me, it's a very multifaceted intelligence. And I love to call that a diamond for that reason. There's a purity about it.
Beautiful. And Sister Jayanti, I know for you as well, the diamond has been used as an image to represent the soul. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Images are a very beautiful way to express subtle truth, and the image is a manifestation, but the actual reality is something else in a sense. But we're using images to convey ideas. And for me, when I come to the awareness of the inner being, I come to the awareness of an infinitesimal point of light. But the light that radiates from this, and it stays here in the center of the forehead, and the light that radiates from this takes on this oval image. So you can say that it's like the flame that surrounds the candle, the point of ignition, but also you can say it's like a diamond with many, many facets, and different facets express different aspects of your personality at different times. But also you can say that at the present time, the diamond has been covered with layers and layers of dust. And so the whole journey of meditation, contemplation, Raj Yoga would be to remove all that dust with the power of the divine love that you can experience through yoga, through connecting with the divine. And that love is able to cleanse the soul so that then the diamond again can shine through.
And that is true of anybody. It's not just two sparkling diamonds like the two of you. It's any individual.
Absolutely, every single individual.
So we're talking here about the power of the inner voice, and I wonder whether you see a difference between the outer and the inner, whether that be the inner voice and our outer voice, or the outer world and our inner world. Is one not just a reflection of the other? Or do you feel that by going within, we are actually accessing something which we can only access on that inward journey? Smita, do you want to take that first?
As such, it's a non-dual. It's a non-dual consciousness. So where the fragmentation comes or the separation comes is so long as we're not aware that it's there. And the moment you become aware of it, it's almost impossible. Like when it impresses its existence on you, like when it comes to you and you allow it, at sometimes like, it happens under stress, like the diamond is formed under, carbon is formed into a diamond under pressure. And very often that's what happens. There is some element of pressure going on where we have this experience, whether it comes to us or we go to it. But the moment we start to bring the inner and the outer into it, we can be aware of the outer, but we need to be aware of the inner. And the two start to then dance together. It's like one arm, sort of moving so that we have a balance, the legs and arms moving in such a way that we have this balance. So for me, there's definitely this existence on the outside, because it depends on how cerebral you are and how much of the conditioning that we have to bear, to cleanse, as it were, or to let go of. So the veils of Maya do definitely impact how we see it. But in reality, the moment we start to accept that there is so much more, like if I'm only an ocean, I'm only a drop of the ocean, what about the ocean? Like, what if I let that in? So it becomes something very, I would say, compulsory, mandatory, to start to understand the ways in which we're not accessing the inner world. So then for me, the two start to move together. And after you guys meditate, you've been meditating for decades. Obviously, Sister Jayanti, you've been so much longer than me. But I don't think it takes that many years of meditation, or self-awareness is probably the main tool that we have to access the two, and bring the two into alignment. And they both have a role to play. And we always diss the ego, but we shouldn't diss the ego, because the ego is required to take action in the world. If I were just sitting in my home in my meditation room and doing nothing else, it's great, but there's more we can do. So the idea is really to bring the identity to understand how it can become a facilitator and an actor, and a facilitator and an actor and a player in its own play at a higher level. And so we start to bridge the gap between the inner and the outer in that way.
And eventually the inner and the outer become one, and there's no separation. But at this point, Sister Jayanti, what is it that we're accessing when we begin that inward journey?
I'd also just like to say a word of introduction to what I'm going to say, in the sense that the whole philosophy of India, whether you call it the Adi Sanatan, Devta Dharma, or you call it Hinduism, whatever is comfortable, but it is so vast and broad, and it encompasses within itself many, many different strands and ideas. And I say this because you mentioned the non-duality, and then there's the concept of the dual, the Atma, the soul connecting with Param Atma. So it's a relationship, it's a bond. Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, and Atma, the soul. And so I belong to that part that follows the path of the Dvaita, the duality. And so, but of course, many of the images you were using are things that I would also agree with totally. And so the idea of the inner being, the Atma, the soul, and here's my external identity, and this is the costume. And so the soul is playing its role through this external costume. And of course, that then determines so much of whatever it is I'm doing. But yes, it's true that sometimes we focus only on the external identity. And that's a very, very narrow perspective to see life through. And within that narrow perspective, it's as if I'm focusing only on the self in a negative way. And what I have to do is to come to the eternal consciousness of the inner being, the I, which is the soul itself. When I connect with the being that I truly am, then in that awareness there's eternity, immortality, spirituality, and there's the purity and the power that the soul has been seeking. And as I come to that inner awareness of who I truly am, and that inner voice is awakening at that moment, then the role that I play is going to be that much more elevated. And so, yes, as you said, when the inner and the outer come together with a higher consciousness, then the role that I play is going to be not just for my own selfish purposes, but it's going to be a contribution to the world. It's going to be of service to humanity. And so it is a journey that you have to go on. Staying on the external level, just the role that I play, I'm defined by relationships, I'm defined by position, by property, possessions, all of these things, which is why I say it's very narrow and limited. But when I come to the awareness of the inner identity, then in that awareness, I'm still doing the same job. I haven't left it. I haven't run off into the jungle or onto the mountaintop. I'm still very much in the world. But now I'm playing that role with the awareness of the eternal being, the eternal I. And you're absolutely right. It's not a question of decades and decades. Because for me, within the first lesson, when I heard that lesson of the inner being, the soul, what is Atma? Even that first lesson was so powerful that it changed everything. And so the journey has been a very beautiful one, challenging, but beautiful, because all the time, on the one side, you're dealing with the obstacles that you create for yourself. Sometimes we think obstacles come from outside, but in fact, it's my own limitations and my own weaknesses that create the obstacles for me. And when I stay connected with the inner being, my vision is unlimited. It's not narrow anymore. So from the very limited, I move into the unlimited space.
I like what you said, that it doesn't take years and years of practice to hear this inner voice. It's something that can happen to anybody in the space of a second. But I'd like to really drill into what it is that we're tuning into, what it is that we're hearing. And to my mind, it seems like there are different levels of consciousness. So if we can deal with them one at a time and begin with just what is personal to just me. And when I'm tuning in and I'm getting, a feeling to do something, I feel like I'm being guided from my own intuition, perhaps. I'm wondering about the role of the subconscious mind. And I'm also wondering, to what extent does just our stuff, our weaknesses, does that have a voice that sometimes we hear, and we need to distinguish between that voice and the voice of the wise part of ourselves? Can you give us any way to navigate that wisdom, that voice that is simply personal to me and my stuff? Smita.
Amazing question, really. And I think it's a fundamental question on the path of, let's call it yoga, because we are looking to align, integrate, and bring together two elements which fundamentally are the same, but they operate in different ways. I just want to say, as a slight disclaimer to this conversation, that the rishis have given us very clear instructions that we must remember that on the path of yoga, the deeper you go, the more you will come into siddhis, clairvoyance, clairaudience, a whole bunch of other things, listening to being able to see spirit beings, whatever.
So particular powers.
There are certain things that emerge, and it could be, and in the art of self-mastery, or the path of self-mastery, and it could be making money. It could be anything, right? And one of the things that I discovered very, very young was that I had this explosion at one time of clairvoyance and clairaudience. And it came with this ability to heal. I still have it, but at that time it was just present. And people could be in my space, or they would come to me with an issue. I might just say something to them, or do something, and it would shift. And people were queuing up outside. I remember being in India one time in Rajkot. There was like people waiting outside, queuing up to come and see me. I was like, no, this is not my path. What happens is these siddhis do emerge, and we have to be very careful that we don't get sidetracked by them, we don't get distracted, because what is the purpose of us as a soul is really to connect to the purity of what is, of Advaita, meaning without a second. So now, coming to the inner void, the mind has a way, all our conditioning that we have will bring up so much stuff. We are so preconditioned, we don't even know. So one of the analogies you could say is, the sunglass analogy with the filters. If you've got yellow lenses on, you'll see everything as yellow. You don't see what's in front of you. And this gives rise to all kinds of ideas, perceptions. The ego wants to know everything. Ego feels it knows everything. So it could be a critical voice. It could be the voice of a parent. It could be however your past has shaped you. So that's something that is very different. In psychology, we talk about that as being the inner voice. In yogic paths, we talk about the inner voice as being the voice of the higher consciousness. One will stop the other. So we do need to be able to understand our own psychology really well in order that we don't get tripped up by it, in order that we don't create more of the same from what we've had in the past in our future. The space of possibility is the pure awareness, and that's what we want to tap into. If we want to heal, if we want to find new realities for ourselves, new possibilities that just in the mind as you know it today, your predictable future is not possible. If you want something way outside of that, which is where the karma and diamonds element comes in, the past, we really need to be able to understand it and sometimes get complete with it, and then understand that we have a choice. And the diamonds part of it is what we can create from that other space that we're talking about, the Atman, tapping into its wisdom, into its intelligence. And learning to listen to that is not such a woo-woo concept. It's literally just aligning yourself to availing of your own intelligence. It's just that it's the intelligence that is beyond the conditioned mind, and the physical body with which we have created, which has perhaps a lot of karma, that we're trauma, all kinds of things that we house in it. So it's really important to understand your psychology. It's really important to distinguish how the voice is different. And I'll tell you how it's different. It's very simple. Anytime we're being driven by the known ego or by the identity, there'll be a sense of force. There'll be a sense of never enough. There's always more to want and to have. Whereas when we tap into the voice of the higher being, the higher intelligence, it's always calm. It doesn't shout. It doesn't actually talk to you in loud voices. It's very subtle. It's a subtle reality, and we need to be able to hear it beyond the noise of our own mind. So the difference is, one is when you hear it, it's so inspiring. It's like almost every time like an epiphany. Having heard it, you can't go back to being the way you were.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you the ways in which you hear it, but Sister Jayanti, I'd like to hear you respond to that. How do you differentiate between intuition, guidance, knowing that is coming from within your own being, and when you are receiving something from a higher dimension, be it your higher self or be it the angelic plane that is possibly giving you something that wouldn't have come from you? How do you distinguish?
Can I first also share some ideas that are very similar and some ideas that may be a little bit different? When I go on that inner journey, the first thing that I notice are my thoughts, and then go a little bit further, and you see your feelings. Go a little bit deeper, and you begin to see your beliefs and your attitudes, and go even deeper, and you begin to see your patterns of behavior. In Hindi we would say sanskaras, but those predispositions that I'm born with, and further that I also generate and create. And so in other language we would say that thoughts and feelings are the conscious mind, connected very much with that. And then there's a word, I'm again going to use the Hindi because I haven't found a proper, adequate translation in one word. But when I talk about attitudes and beliefs, it's actually buddhi. And the best word I can find is intellect, but it doesn't totally convey what the buddhi really is. And I think many of you are either travelers on this path, so you would have come across this term buddhi, and many of you would know Hindi, so you would know this term. So the buddhi is that part which is the subconscious, but I can tap into it and get to know it through silence, through my own inner journey. But then there's the unconscious, which are the sanskaras, which I only get to know gradually. I would say that takes a long time. If you don't get to know your unconscious patterns, it's a long journey, and you still sometimes get surprised by what comes out. So that the sanskaras are the unconscious. And meditation is first of all dealing with the mind, and then further on, you see the Gita talks about focusing your mind on the divine, man manabhav, remember me. So the remembrance is through the mind, but it also talks about buddhi yoga, the connection of the buddhi, your understanding, your belief, your attitude, connecting that with the divine. And then through those connections, what you're doing is actually transforming your own sanskaras. You're uplifting them, those sanskaras, to their own highest state. So that in a way is the anatomy of the soul. And so most times I'm listening to people from outside. Sometimes I'm listening and seeing where my mind is going, and feelings take me in different places. Feelings, emotions, very connected. And so sometimes the power of feelings and emotions is such that it totally overrides what the conscience is saying. And I use the word conscience now for the buddhi. That ability that every soul has to discern between right and wrong. And I know that in today's world, sometimes it's fashionable to think that there's no such thing as right and wrong. But in fact, karma is telling me that whatever are the results that are coming my way are the outcome of my good or not so good deeds. So there is something which is right and wrong. And my buddhi, when it's clear, is able to guide me. And as you said, a very, very soft, gentle voice. When the emotions come, they're not soft. They sometimes come as a sledgehammer. You know, when I get angry, that's not my buddhi, that's my mind, my feelings, my emotions. When I feel jealousy, but also when I feel love in a very passionate way, that's also the emotion. So there's good emotions too. The voice, as you said correctly, the voice of the mind and feelings and emotions is a very strong one. And when I follow that, it's sometimes dangerous. When I allow myself to be calm and quiet and connect with the inner being, then the mind is very much connected with what's going on out here. But the intellect, the buddhi, is what I connect with when I go inside. And then I can hear the voice of my conscience. And one of the problems with this is that if I ignore the voice of conscience, maybe another time it'll speak to me, but the second time I ignore it, it's going to stop speaking to me. And so the conscience falls asleep. Where do you think we are at in this world today along this trajectory? The conscience awake or the conscience asleep? I leave you to figure it out. When we see all the tragedies around us and the crazy things that are happening, it makes me feel that the conscience is really heavily gone to sleep, very deep sleep. But of course, at the same time, we are seeing this awakening of interest in meditation and spirituality. So it's like there's a descending force and an ascending force at the same time, at this particular time in history, which is unique. We've never had such a time before when both the negativity is so strong, but also the rise of positivity and spirituality is equally, or maybe I would say, even more powerful and strong. You know, think about all the forces that prevented you or tried to prevent you from coming here tonight. And that immediately tells you how powerful those forces are. But you're here. And so the inner voice was telling you to come. They turned out to be stronger. But it's a minority for whom this applies. It's not a majority. So one level is where I'm just listening to my feelings and emotions. The other level is where I let my mind become calm and quiet so that I can start listening to what my inner voice is actually telling me. And so that's the state that I would say is where you're listening to your inner voice, where you're listening to your intuition. And then, yes, when I'm connected with the divine in yoga, then there's very definitely not just the experience of the power of love and truth and joy that comes from the source itself, but there's also the guidance that comes. And it's not in words, it's not specific, go here, do this, do that, but it definitely gives you a very clear awareness of what I need to be doing. What is it that I need to focus on? And if I'm following in that through, then it comes through more and more clearly. And so the whole journey of purification, which is the journey of yoga or meditation, the more I'm able to keep my mind calm and still, active, alert, focused, but that's very different to the energy of just the negative forces that we're usually exposed to, the attachments, the ego, the anger, and so on. And so I need to let the mind become calm and still, and I need to let my intellect become, my buddhi, become powerful. Because we've always also had this experience where the conscience is speaking, but the emotions are so strong that they take over, and I ignore that. And so the purification of the buddhi is one in which I have more and more clarity to understand what I need to do, but also the connection with the divine gives me the power to be able to then follow that through in my life, so that it's not just that my conscience spoke and it was then pushed down by my emotions, that my conscience spoke and I've been developing my will, my inner power, because sometimes it's sheer determination that you need to use your willpower to allow your conscience to come through into life, because again, there'll be forces that will try and push that down.
Amazing to think how the world would be if all the world leaders learned how to listen to their inner conscience. It's quite a thought, isn't it? We've got so used to it being very much not that. Smita, where do you sit in terms of feeling this guidance from, I think you used the word Paramatma, the supreme soul or the divine? How does that come through for you?
So Sister Jayanti just gave this incredible, clear explanation of the anatomy of how the soul, the Atman, Brahman, all the way down to the Jivatman actually works. My experience, I have to say, Sister Jayanti, is that it does tell me where to go, do this, do that. I've been in situations, there was one time I was in Hawaii in a lava tube, and there was no light, so people had their own lights, but I was in a part, I literally walked in, there was nobody there, I had no light, and it was pitch black. It's not an active lava tube, it's an extinct one, but we are allowed to walk in. So, and there were all kinds of creepy crawlies there and all kinds of stuff. And I didn't know where I was. And I literally told me what to do, what do I have to do? And I do hear, do this, do that. And I think it's a very specific skill to develop when you are a little bit lazy, like I am, to, take the battery with you or to take the torch with you and stuff. I have been in very, very tight situations. I write about this in the books. There are several instances where this has happened to me, where I have literally been guided step by step to come out of a forest. There was just a forest outside of there. And so for me, perhaps it's simply because I've really taught myself to listen to that level of and I've developed that relationship. Say, what do I need to do? Other times when I ask, the answer isn't there because the time is not there. And perhaps there's a part of me that is resisting something. There's still some fear, there's still something which is so subtle. I mean, it's powerful, but it's not an obvious thing that I can acknowledge in the moment because it's so interwoven into my identity. So there are times when I'm not able to hear it because there is something that is like a disconnect. So I do find that knowing is a very powerful sense. as opposed to understanding or the intellect. Knowing is coming from that space where you just know. You don't need to prove it to anybody. You don't need any proof for that thing to be there. You know. And when I talk about knowing, I don't mean like about another person, like I know that she did that, or it's not that level of conversation. We're talking about knowing internally at a very peaceful, calm, like this is my part. I appreciate you may not resonate with it, you may not approve of it, but this is what I'm here to do. And there's a courage that comes with that knowing. So sometimes it shows up as a knowing, given, coupled with something, the Shakti, that grants you the ability to walk that path alone, knowing that nobody may join you on that path. The time may never come, but that is your path, and that is the right thing to do. And usually it's not harmful to anybody else. So there are multiple ways in which it manifests. Intuition. So one of the main things to look out for, I love creating serendipities. And again, the books are talking about that. So I may ask a question, say like, what about this? What do I do? Do I need to, why am I not feeling like going to that thing? I might be driving past a billboard and there's this message on there, and or I might be listening to the radio or the music, a song comes on with a certain tune or a certain, and it just is a confirmation. I'm not a big believer in angel numbers and stuff like that per se, but I do listen. I do believe that we're interconnected. And if you ask a question of something which doesn't operate in linear language, then you should be prepared to receive the answer in language that it speaks to you, and it has multiple ways of communicating, and it's non-linear. So so it's a case of kind of opening. It's like learning a new language.
Anyone can learn it. In a way, it's kind of synchronicities that you're talking about, where it feels like you're getting a confirmation from the universe that this is the right way for you to go or not, or seeing a sign or a symbol that has some meaning. I think, Sister Jayanti, we've all experienced this, where you are maybe about to go down a certain road and you just get this feeling, don't go down there. And you find out later that something really bad happened and you would have come across it. What is happening in these moments when it does feel like we're getting an intervention and we're getting a very clear direction? Is that just coming from our super consciousness, or do you feel that there is a higher presence guiding us in these moments?
Definitely there is a higher presence, and if I connect and if I'm in that state of awareness, then I will be able to catch that signal. And it wouldn't have been just from my own mind, it would have come from that higher source. But it's not like an instruction, it's different to what you're describing. I totally accept that there can be this experience, but for me it's then just a feeling, don't go there, go here, rather than a verbal thing, but just that feeling that it's more important to be here rather than there. And yes, I also had that, I connected very well with your comment about knowing. And when you know what's right for you, and people around you are telling you otherwise, but you know what it is you need to do, then I think that is my own higher self telling me. It wouldn't have been coming to me if I was in a lower consciousness, but, and it happened to me very early on through meditation. As I say, it took 6 weeks to come to the decision that this is the life I want to have. And 19, and you can imagine a lot of people were telling me this is crazy, because their question was, well, what if you change your mind later on? I said, well, that's also fine. But I said, I told my father, when my mother married you, she was 16 and she hasn't changed her mind. And so he said, okay, because I didn't want to do something without their consent and blessings, but I had to make them understand that this was something I really needed to do. And it was a knowing that this was going to be my life. So I think that was my higher self telling me, and not just something coming from above.
I be nice to just, because we're talking about something that is really to be experienced, and it would be lovely to hear both of you just lead us into an experiential aspect of this. And it would be nice as well to hear from our audience here. So if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask our wise speakers here, then do be getting ready with your questions. But Smita, could you just lead us for a few moments into an experience of what it is that you're talking about and the kind of thoughts that you use to help you get into that right space when you can catch this inner voice?
I like to keep it really simple. Easy, effortless, joyful is my mantra. And anything that's really like hard work, it doesn't last, and so it's not sustainable. And I really like to make this very easy. What we'll do, let's just go into a very short, a mini, as it were, meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd like to, everybody just sit very comfortably in a way that you can find yourself being really still. Bring your eyes closed, and we're really just going to focus on the breath for the first few moments. So I'd like you to just focus on the breath. So take a breath in any way that feels good to you through the nose, preferably out through the nose. Now, when you're inhaling the next time, have your hand on your heart, one hand and then the other on top. Just allow yourself to breathe into that space. So slow the breath right the way down. Really allow the breath to become very soft, smooth. And then as you exhale, slow, controlled, disciplined exhale with the breath. And as you inhale the next time, bring the hand a little bit lower in that space between two ribs and just allow the breath to lengthen a little bit longer. Relax the belly. Allow the lungs to fill very slowly, softly, gently. And as you exhale, allow the breath to leave the body. So really just slowly, very slowly. Relax the shoulders. Bring the hands a little bit lower down onto the belly. And as you breathe in next time, keep lengthening the breath a little bit longer, a little bit smoother, a little bit more directed. And then allow the breath to leave through the nose very slowly. And just feeling that the belly wants to press back all the way to the spine because the lungs are emptying out. And relax the shoulders again as you breathe in. Relax the hands now and just continue the rhythm of breath a little bit longer. So think about the breath as being something that you can drink, like your favorite tipple. Keep breathing. And exhale. Couple more breaths like this on your own. Really slowing the whole pace down. Relaxing the body, having a sense of being really present in your seat. Maybe feeling the body heavy as the breath becomes your sole focus. The body starts to relax. And I'd just like you to hear the hum in the room. The hum, perhaps an Om type hum. It might just be a hum. It might be Om through your right ear. And perhaps it feels good to you to visualize a light, powerful, pure light, perhaps piercing in through the third eye, filling the head. And perhaps in the next breath, you might allow that light to perhaps go to the back of the head and start to cascade down like a bunch of diamonds, sparkling all the way down through the heart, back of the waist, all the way down to the tailbone. And then perhaps rising again in the inhale, again up the spine, starting to become very comfortable in allowing the breath, the light in. And let's introduce the mantra Soham, that Isha Upanishad mantra, meaning I am that. I am that which is beyond my identity. I am that consciousness which is untouched by my human experience. So on the next inhale, perhaps you will allow the inhale to rise with the so of the hum. So as you inhale, inhaling in so. As you exhale, exhale the hum. Inhale so. Exhale hum. Inhaling so. Exhaling hum, and then slowly allowing your awareness to simply focus at the third eye. Breath is now soft, comfortable, absorbing the silence, the sounds, the stillness. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, just pure being. Becoming so comfortable in the silence, in the stillness. Noticing how nourishing it feels just to breathe, just to be. Noticing yourself that you're sitting there, you're breathing, you're still. Become aware of the presence that is noticing you, the body, you observing yourself. That observer is not the body. That is the Soham. That is the you beyond the mind and the body. That is the real you. Always there, always witnessing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Smita. The breath, of course, is something that is always with us, hopefully. And so it's something we can just use in a very practical way to not just slow our breathing, but slow our mind and the chatter of our mind. So that's a practice you can always do anytime, anywhere. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, we do have a couple of roving mics. So if you would like to share your experience or ask any question, do just raise your hand and Shantanu will bring the mic to you. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Firstly, thank you. What I wanted to know is when you're in your day-to-day life in the corporate world, I'd love to bring the meditation moment by moment into your, interactions, productivity, and really, just using that power. What is the best way to do that? Although I meditate every day in the morning and I'm calm, but I'm not always when people react or something great doesn't happen. So it's very...
I kind of really share that question because it's one thing to be calm when things are calm, but how do you hold on to that in the cut and thrust of everyday life, particularly when you're up against it?
breathing. It's really that simple. The first go-to is noticing the breath. If you're able to do that, you've already accomplished that step beyond, because what happens is, why are we getting stressed? What is it that's stressing us? So it's usually one of the 6 shadripus is at play. It's the anger, it's the jealousy, it's the envy, it's the arrogance, it's attachment to a point of view sometimes, which grips us, that it has to be this way. And so whichever one is at play in that moment, it's great if you can catch yourself. What's happening right now? Breathe into that just for a moment, because in the corporate world, sometimes we do need to assert ourselves because there are many, many personalities that want to overwhelm us. So it's also important that we don't necessarily get railroaded by people, but that we have our presence of being. If we can have that comes through the breath, that interrupts the automatic that happens when we want to kind of, let's stick it to them, I'll tell them what I think. And so we want to interrupt that cycle. It never gives power. It's never powerful to be in that space. There's always way more power when we have our presence and we can say what there is to say in calm, collected, and super Shaktiful way.
Shakti meaning the spiritual powers.
Yes. Well, Shakti just meaning the incredible power that we each have within ourselves, that feminine, that Durga power. Whether you're a man or a woman, you want to tap into the Shakti as opposed to the Shiva, like, I'm going to chop your head off because I didn't like what you just said. So we want to tap into that. And it really, really works. But the access to interrupting the automatic, as Sister Jayanti was saying earlier, the sanskars that we have, is like we do want to prove ourselves. So we do want to have that. Or the other side of it is that, if we have a tendency to kind of be the victim, then somebody will impose that behavior on you. So whatever dynamic is going on, it doesn't really matter if you can't distinguish it in the moment. Something is arising that is not powerful, not going to be your friend, and then to breathe into that space. And it doesn't take like forever. You're literally just getting present when I talk about breathing. It's present, but the breath is the access to interrupting that. For me, that works fairly well.
We've experienced your approach, and obviously you're using breathing in a practical way day to day. For you, Sister Jayanti, it's not so much a focus on breath as on thinking and right thinking. And, you're in a very senior leadership role of an organization of over a million people from 140 countries around the world. So, you're really at the cutting edge of being in situations where you're needing to offer guidance whilst keeping calm. What are your top tips in those moments when you can feel the temperature is rising and, moods are not going so well? How do you bring it back together?
Very simple. Come back here. Come back to the awareness of the inner being and let the light inside shine again. And when I become aware of that light that's shining, then that is, as you said, it breaks that cycle of action, reaction, and reactivity that we all get caught up with. But just that remembrance, that awareness that I am the soul, the diamond, the shining light, then that changes things very much. That's one thing to do in the moment. The other thing is to actually practice a moment of pause regularly through the day. Some of you mentioned you have the practice of meditation every day, maybe morning and evening even, but there's many hours in between and many things can happen during that time. And so if there's a discipline in which I remind myself maybe every hour on the hour, and you can get all sorts of devices to remind you of that, whether it's your phone, whether it's your watch, whatever, but just pausing for a moment every hour on the hour, and you're again coming back to this inner consciousness, this inner awareness, and that will then kick into action when you need it. If you've forgotten about this through the whole day, then old habits will emerge. But if I'm practicing this consciousness of the inner being, the soul, the being of peace, because peace is our original nature. There's a lovely expression, Atma ka swadharam hai shanti. And so my original dharma, my original way of living, of being, is of peace, shanti. So if I can remind myself of that every hour, on the hour, then when I need to, I'll come back here.
And for you, is it a particular visualization of the point of light? Is it a particular thought, like, I'm a peaceful being? What is your quickest way of getting yourself into that place?
It used to be visualization, but more than that now, it's the feeling, the awareness.
And that becomes like a sort of little energy vibration that is with you, and you can just come back into it in a second.
If you've been practicing this, then you can come back to it very quickly. And then this is what is guiding me in the way in which I speak and respond and act and do.
Two quite different techniques, but both seem very effective. Any more questions?
Mine wasn't a question, it was just concurring with what Sister Jayanti said, in that I think we call it traffic control. And it is so powerful. I mean, especially in the corporate world, when it can be so stressful every day when you're just working really hard. And actually, I do every hour, my phone goes off and really annoys my family. But, it's just a reminder just to say, just take a step back, reflect. And for me, it's more visualization at the moment, Shiv Baba. And it really has helped me calm and get through life, really. So yeah, concur with that.
That's really lovely to hear. Thank you. And I know we've got guests here who run an online meditation for people working in business and industry. Else sat here in the front row, so you can join in online things as well. People can think that you're sat at your computer working, and actually you're doing a little online meditation. And many companies are now really seeing the value of having these for their employees, because their productivity improves. Thank you so much for that. The next question.
Hi, I'm Dipali, and I just wanted to request Sister Jayanti to enlighten us with the distinction between intuition and inner voice.
I've sometimes heard this term intuition as the inner tutor. And so it is that voice, the silent voice, that's guiding me. So I would say that both are the same, the voice within and the intuition.
Oftentimes I think about what's my swabhav, and I speak out and I say, can you guide me, or what's next for me? And I hear nothing, it's just silence. So I feel like I'm not tapping into my inner voice, and I just, and something you said, sometimes you don't hear your inner voice because there's a disconnect. So I just wanted to learn more about that, please.
Thank you. Lovely question. Is it okay to ask? If you want to get some guidance, can you say, please show me what I do here?
I do it all the time. I do it on a daily basis, many times a day, because the commitment is to be guided by that higher being. I'm very intellectual. I have a lot of confidence in my intellect, etc. But honestly, after a while, it becomes a little bit less interesting. Sometimes the buddhi doesn't actually take you where you need to go, because even though you might be the brightest person in the world, the answers are not coming from there, because it gives you the stuff that is known already. And what we're often seeking, and it sounds to me, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name? Hina. It sounds, Hina, like you might be wanting something beyond what you know. And when you're asking a question that wants to take you in a different direction, very often we're not equipped with hearing the answer. It may already have come, But because it sounds so different to what you may have perceived, the challenges, and Jayanti Didi said earlier that it's very challenging. A lot of the challenge is in understanding that we don't get the answers we want. We get the answers as they come. And as our higher self means for us to guide us on our true path, the path of the higher self, the self with a capital S, as opposed to self here. So sometimes it doesn't sound like the kind of thing we would do. The other thing I think is different people respond to receiving answers in different ways. And so there is a skill to be had by trying out journaling, by just allowing yourself to ask a question. I do that a lot. And I just let the words come and I write down what comes. And you'd be amazed at how much the flow happens. So sometimes it's a case of, sometimes I just twirl around in a room, literally to spin off the energies that to get into that higher frequency. It's something similar. Sometimes we have to discover for ourselves, what is that thing for us? My husband digs holes, by the way, and we have like this huge, massive grounds where there's like big holes that he's done, and just so he can fill those holes with something, he'll put in a new sewer system or something. So for him, that works.
As a way of accessing the divine.
As a way of accessing the divine.
I've not heard that one before.
I'm telling you, it is so personal and so individual. And it does take practice. So sometimes we may not hear it because the practice hasn't quite, it's not honed in enough. It's a bit like cooking. If you want to make perfectly round rotis, we need to learn how to stand, how to balance, how much water should go in the flour, how much oil, how much heat, how we need to roll it. It's that kind of a skill.
As well, I'm just thinking, it's not like we're going to hear a trumpet call and then a cherub will say, here is your message from the divine.
Yeah.
Especially for you.
Sometimes.
The divine is going to perhaps speak to us in ways that we're not expecting. So, it could be speaking to us through what someone else is saying.
Yes.
It could be a sign, it could be a symbol, it could be a color, it could be something that has significance. And we need to learn the language that the divine is perhaps trying to speak to us in, so that we can pick it up. Otherwise, we're saying, you're not helping me. I mean, you're not saying anything. And that's actually, there's so much coming. You're just not seeing it.
And the trust.
And
trusting yourself. Yeah. Trusting that voice.
Yeah.
Trusting that feeling.
Sister Jayanti, do you get a trumpet call? Or how do you know when it's, this is your email from above?
I'm not into trumpet calls. But I was just thinking that on the one side, yes, when you need to ask. Absolutely, no problem with that. But you can also get guidance through spiritual knowledge and wisdom. If you open up the Granth Sahib, for example, then it's got a message for you for that day. And so we also have our own study. We have what we call the Murlis. And so every day there's a Murli that we study. And within that, I get many, many answers. And so I know I've been in situations where I've been thinking that, this is really too much. I don't want this to carry on. I just have to be very powerful and stand up and say, this is not right and whatever. And the next day, I read the Murli, and the Murli is saying, be tolerant, be patient. And it's giving me a very different direction to what I thought I should be doing. And of course, then I know that the Murli is coming from above. It's giving me the right guidance. And so I become calm and tolerant and carry on.
That is beautiful, because we are living in an interconnected world. And I think we sometimes forget that the help is there from higher realms. And it's accessible and free all the time. And we just don't use it all the time. But actually, we could.
For me, it's like eating, bread without any butter or any jam. In spite of having everything in the outside world, having the love in my life, there's still something which is so absolutely juicy, like the rus, of life. The juice of life is in that space. And it actually amplifies the colors of everything on the outside when we have that active. Otherwise, it's not that we don't enjoy driving nice cars or having success in life, or, whatever your thing might be, but, or being in a relationship with a loving partner. But when that connection is there, it just, like, it is the trumpets. There is that essence of, oh, it's so amazing. I love it here. And that's the difference, is that it amplifies everything to a whole new level.
And it does make other things pale into insignificance once you've tasted that, because it is like the nectar,
The nectar,
elixir.
it is the juice. One of my mentors used to say, how gorgeous can you stand life? And it's really a case of, how can I, when you have a gorgeous life, now what? Well, where's the next gorgeousness coming from? Because the experience of being here, that's the invitation. How high can you elevate your ability to receive what's available? How available are you to embody that, to receive and to embody and to hold that frequency and that vibration, so that you can experience that and you can then share that?
And it is about service. At the end of the day, it's about sharing what you've experienced yourself, and that makes it all the richer for you. Were there any final burning questions, or are we good?
I just want to ask one question, Sister Jayanti. You mentioned about tolerance. I want to know, when does the the height of tolerance ends? Like, when do we know that, okay, I've been tolerant enough, and now it's my time to listen to the inner voice, because that's the position where I am, maybe, where it has to end. The tolerance has to end, maybe.
For me, there's a very clear dividing line. And that dividing line is it really a matter of principle, or is it a matter of just choice? And so if it's a matter of principle, then I have to do what I have to do. And it's not a question of any bargaining or any negotiation. If it's a principle, I'm going to follow that. And then there's a whole big area of what is my choice and what is your choice. And so I can be tolerant within that. I can adjust, I can say, okay, today let's be this, tomorrow let it be mine. So one can negotiate all of that. When it's a question of principles, there's no negotiation. That's where I have to follow what my principles tell me.
Just one follow-up question. Would the principle mean personal values? Because I read somewhere that values can differ person to person.
Yes, it's very much connected with the core values that I carry within myself, whether it's the value of peace, of truth, of non-violence. These are some of the core values that the soul carries. And so, yes, purity, these are the things that I have to be absolutely adamant about. But in other things, it's okay. I can move with the flow.
You talked earlier about pathways that you followed, like you got your calling, or you knew something you were going to have to do. This is your path. I've been looking for my path, and I'm now reaching towards the end of my career. I work in the HE sector and I have so for 30 years. And what brought me here this evening was because I'm in an inquiry about it. Like, have I been doing anything useful? Have I achieved anything? Have I served my purpose? I just want to know, how do you know if you are on your path?
I would suggest that you start a journey in meditation, and maybe you have already been doing that, but just move forward, continuing on that path. And if you haven't started the journey of meditation, well, this is an invitation to begin that. And as you continue along that journey, it becomes very clear. It might not happen very quickly, but it'll come. and also this aspect of purpose in terms of serving. Whatever situation you're in, you can serve through thoughts, you can serve through words, you can serve through actions in some form or another. And so that's another thing to do. The meditation's one side, and the other way is, in what way can I serve? What can I do that can be of assistance to others? And you spoke beautifully earlier about how when you're full, then you want to give. You want to share all the treasures that you yourself have received. And so the meditation and this aspect of being able to give to others, maybe it's time, maybe it's a smile.
Thank you for that question. And I think it's one that many people have, that there is a sense that there is a life purpose that they haven't quite yet tapped into, and they intuitively know that. And as Sister Jayanti is saying, it's a question of being open, of asking, can you hear the calling? And having heard it, can you fully listen to it? And can you then actually act on it? So invite that in, and there will be answers for you, and they will come to you. You just create that space, and the answers will come to you. So a lovely question.
I just want to add something to that. It's a really valid inquiry. Like, I've been in this corporate world, or I've been doing this job. Has it really made a difference? Am I making a difference? And I think we turn ourselves into yogic pretzels doing, asking that question. And really, the thing to understand is that every single one of us, what we're doing, where we are, if we were to stop doing that, what would happen? The chain actually breaks down. And I think we often need to just shift our perspective when we're asking that question. When I was working in the corporate roles, one of the things was I was in a corporate world. I mean, believe me, the politics is awful. The people can sometimes be very, very challenging. And, there's a lot of pressure to deal with on a daily basis, results to deliver. So it's not so easy. What makes the difference in how you view your role is the context you're going to give it. Like, what am I doing here? If all you're doing in your mind is you're showing up to work, you're going through the motions, and you're taking a paycheck home, that will not fulfill you. You want to take a look outside of that. Why did your higher self place you there in the first place? There is a reason why you're there. There is something for you to learn inside of your soul's journey. And at the very least, that's part of your purpose. But also, in the work that you do, you are invariably making a difference, because otherwise you wouldn't be there. That job would not be with you, right? So I think we do need to understand the bigger picture of working in an energy company, for example, what is that doing? What is the purpose of that? What happens if the lights went out tomorrow? And we all have a role to play in that, big or small, however that might be. But that's the place I personally chose to stand, is like to really get that I make it. I was one of the first people to start working in the Indian IT industry. I was one of the first five people. And believe me, nobody wanted it. Nobody understood it. They thought we all worked in sweatshops. And with the paradigm shift that I personally was involved in creating, I could have just said, nobody wants this, I'm not going to do this. But I saw the opportunity in that role. It's like, no, I can see the vision. I can see what's possible. And it was really shift and bringing that to bear in the speaking, in the unfolding of that role. So I think often we don't see the potential that's there for us to actually make a difference right where we are. It doesn't mean you shouldn't change, but it also doesn't mean to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe the question in your case, where you're kind of ending your role, at the period of life where you may be, then kind of go, what would I love to learn? Is there something I'd love to learn? So we all want to make a huge difference, but at the same time, maybe the place to begin is to go and learn a new skill, learn something that would really feel amazing. And it doesn't have to be, like you said, trumpets. It can be way more accessible and enjoyable. And then that opens doors to other things. Who knows?
Sister Jayanti, final word from you. What is it that you do in your life that makes you feel that you're living your life purpose?
I know that when I connect with the divine, it fills me with joy, with love, with power, with everything that I need. And when I do that, then I also know that it's such a vast giving from the divine that it's not just restricted to me, but it reaches out and goes to others also. So I think that at this moment, that for me is the most important.
Bringing that energy through and serving the world with that same feeling. I'm not going to invite any more questions because we're going to be thrown out by the Nehru Centre otherwise before we finish. Sister Jayanti, could you lead us in a final meditation just to kind of bring our beautiful time here together to a close? And thank you both so much for sharing from your hearts so beautifully. I'm sure everyone here has been touched in one way or another, and we've certainly got a lot to go away and think about. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for channeling the questions.
Yeah, thank you for anchoring, hosting, bringing your experience to bear, Philippa. It's really a joy to have this conversation.
My total pleasure.
You're a pro.
A little bit similar in the way Smita led us earlier. Both feet on the ground so that the body is balanced and the back straight and the mind alert. It's the end of the week, it's the end of the day, so it's very easy to slide off into deep silence, which is not quite meditation, but I'll share my own thoughts in meditation and invite you to follow these ideas. I go within and come to the awareness of the inner being. I am the light that shines in the center of the forehead. I am the soul. And I go deeper and deeper within myself and come to that space where there is stillness. And in this awareness, I feel the peace that lies within. I am a being of peace. And in this awareness, the speed of my thoughts has slowed down, and I can select the thoughts I choose to have. I reflect on peace, and my mind begins to experience peace within. And as the speed of my thoughts becomes really slow, and the awareness of peace becomes stronger, I can sense the presence of the divine, the supreme, the source, the highest of all, a being of light, the source of peace, of love, of truth, purity and joy. And these are the treasures that the Supreme bestows on the soul. I absorb all these qualities within myself, and from the ocean they reach not only I, the soul, but they reach each member of the human family. That from the ocean, the waves of each one of these qualities reach out to all living creatures, to all the elements of nature, so the nature returns to a state of harmony and balance. And from the source, the power of peace and the power of love encompasses the whole planet. I stay connected with the source so that I may absorb all these qualities within myself. And I come back to the awareness of this place here and now, but I hold this experience so that this experience guides my thinking, my speaking, and my doing. Thank you. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Sister Jayanti. And thank you to all of you for being here this evening. I wish you all the best on your journey with discovering your own inner voice and the power of your inner voice. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime, hopefully very soon. Go well. Take care. Bye-bye.